Welcome to episode 9 of the Hare and Tortoise with myself, Lee, the intrepid athlete, and Harry, running to eat more. In today's episode, we're going to talk about some frontal plane training for runners in terms of how it's important to minimize the risk of injury. But before we do that, Harry recently attended one of my strength for runners classes. So he's going to give you a bit of an open and honest review. Promise there's no bias. All right. I've told him to be as relentless as he needs to be. So yes, he's just going to lay out some of his thoughts and reviews of doing one of my strength runners classes.
Yeah, so brilliant. So on Saturday, we actually met for the first time in person, didn't we? I think probably a lot of people think we've probably met in person quite a lot, but that was the first time, wasn't it?
I was, yeah. Corona stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, went to the class in Penrith. If you don't know, it's in Cumbria in the Lake District, and it's just like it was quite a weird location actually. I didn't expect it to be. It's kind of like in the middle of nowhere, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it tends to be a lot of sort of S&C gyms or strength and conditioning gyms tend to be in like industrial estates and stuff tucked away somewhere.
Yeah, but it's cool. It's basically not far from where I live, so I just went down with a couple of friends, and I think the class was full with 8, I believe, wasn't it?
Yes.
Brilliant, yeah, and all mapped out with with COVID guidelines. Everyone had their own space. There was cleaning equipment and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, it was something completely new for someone like me and the 2 people I brought along. We've done kind of online workouts and HIIT classes recently, and for a few years, to be fair, the kind of stuff that gets your heart raised, and you're doing burpees all the time and squats, body squats and press ups, which is all great and has its place for general fitness and running, of course.
Yeah.
But this was going into it, we knew this was something different. As I said before, like this was going to be more kind of strength based, more slower kind of movements and more precision, getting the technique kind of right. Because obviously I've seen little clips on like Instagram and Facebook of Lee doing his work in this class, and yeah, so we had an idea of what it might be. And yeah, as expected, there were lots of different exercises. I'll list a few of them here, although I don't know the technical name for all of them. At the start, we did like a sprint on one leg, but we'd hold it for 10 seconds. So it was to hold for 10 seconds in the sprint position, stood up, and then after 10 seconds, you'd quickly switch it. And then we slightly progressed that, didn't we, to with eyes closed, which was very hard actually. But yeah, that was what we started with, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was just a single leg balance exercise. But obviously it's good being able to do single leg balance just in a static position, i.e. just having one leg off the floor, but that's not as transferable to running, which is obviously a single leg exercise, and we obviously have some element of balance and stability as we change from one foot to the other. So like you just said there, that's all we did in that was you stood on one leg, but in just a bit more of a specific run posture, that sprinter start position. And then, yeah, you just transition straight over to one leg as quickly as you can while sticking the balance and being able to stabilize reactively. And then, yeah, obviously doing it with the eyes closed just takes that bit of feedback out and relies more on the proprioceptors on the bottom of the foot to give that feedback and hopefully, again, improve stability.
Yeah, brilliant. Just to give a quick overview, by the way, just the class was absolutely brilliant. Like all these exercises and moves, I just know from my experience and the 2 friends I brought along, we hadn't really done many of them before, even if a few of them are fairly simple and standard, such as calf raises or, the knee squats. It's not something we've done before, as I said, like we've done more kind of HIIT workouts or stuff like that, where it's, a lot more intense. So this was great. Really targeting specific parts of the body. And as you say, with the sprint exercise at the start, I guess it really kind of fine tunes your kind of movement as a runner, especially with your eyes closed. Because I know I was certainly struggling with it. I was struggling with it, to be fair, with my eyes open, but you might not have noticed. But yeah,
I did. Don't worry.
I tried to keep it quiet, but yeah, my balance isn't amazing. But that is something as a runner, obviously you kind of need. You might think, when you're running, you're not going to like be falling over all the time, but just in terms of, you'll be able to expand on this. But in terms of like efficiency and just general forward dynamic and just being balanced going forward, having that balance must be crucial to kind of speed and general movement.
Absolutely. And it's going to feed well into the topic we're going to talk about today with frontal plane training. So, having good stability at the foot and ankle, which is essentially the term we use for balance, it just means that the foot and ankle is better at resisting forces from those other planes. It's stronger in resisting those forces. So, helping minimize the instance of ankle strains and rolling your ankle and all that sort of stuff. And while that might be a little bit more applicable to trail and off-road and all that stuff than kind of just road in general, there's still an element of obviously dealing with cambers in roads and all that sort of stuff that you would as a road runner. So it still has some applicability to that as well.
Definitely, yeah. And then we moved on to the side race, or the lateral agility to sprint.
Yeah.
So basically, it was kind of, well, it was a competition, wasn't it? So we were lined up against one other person, and one person would be the lead, and therefore they control where the other person went in a lateral direction. So it's basically, if you don't know what it is, it's just like side hops, I guess,
Yeah.
is the best way to describe it. Just like, like crab, I guess. You're just going across. So the lead would decide which way you went. You might go quickly one way and then another, and then at any point you decide, the lead could decide to sprint to one side, whichever they wanted, and which was a really good drill. Like, very fun. Obviously, you're smiling the whole time, with the person opposite you. Um, if you, I'm not too sure. Is that another lateral kind of exercise to kind of help balance that kind of thing?
So there's a huge amount. So you'll see again, like, because you come into class today as well. That element of the class is, like I said, we look at different skills, whether that's plyometrics, change of direction, acceleration. So number one, you've got the ability to change direction quickly, which is going to build durability, especially in the Achilles. That's where you're doing that lateral side to side, being able to plant the foot, move quickly, all that stuff. And whilst again that's more applicable to team sports, we still need that general athleticism, as it were, and that durability which you get from that. And then obviously the sprint and acceleration again is just good at power and force generation, which we all need as runners, especially the shorter distance runners like 5Ks and things like that. And then two, by getting one person to be the lead and one person to be the follower, it becomes more reactive. So then again, you're relying on the brain to interpret what it sees in front of it, and then obviously make those adjustments just like you would when you run. You don't have someone in there telling you in advance that you need to watch out for this bit of terrain or change direction here, etc., etc. It's all governed by the brain seeing what's in front of it, and that's what you're then trying to replicate as you're following the leader, doing whatever they're doing in terms of that movement. So it's just a bit of confidence, athleticism, and agility, like I said, which, whilst we don't need it in abundance, it's still a good skill and just improve that resilience as a runner, especially, like I said, for minimizing strains and all that sort of stuff around the Achilles and the calf complex.
Definitely, yeah. I think, as you say, a lot of people assume agility isn't like an important part of running because, you're not generally change direction quickly, at least. But it clearly is, especially if you're on like a different terrain, like maybe trail. Your foot pattern's not going to be, you're not necessarily changing direction, but your foot patterns are going to be kind of different as well.
But like, it's not just the change of direction. So you think every time you were doing those lateral agilities, you were planting the foot and absorbing impact and decelerating, which is absolutely what you have to do when you run. You're always constantly absorbing impact, using that to distribute around the muscles and joints, and also, like I said, being able to decelerate on demand is a skill. And that's another thing that we were doing there with those lateral movements, is you being able to plant, decelerate, change direction. And whilst you may not be changing direction, you're still going to have to slow down, decelerate when you're running uphill, downhill, all that sort of stuff. So again, it helps build that durability, which again, that is definitely transferable to running.
Yeah, and I think a good point to make is, with all these exercises, it's by no means, the faster runner you are, the better you're going to be at them. I mean, you saw from me, like, I was one of the worst for many of them.
No, you weren't at all, mate. You weren't at all.
Like,
The other reason I like it is because it's fun. Like you just said then,
yeah,
there's lots of other ways that we could improve durability of the calf and the Achilles and all that sort of stuff. But that way helps, and it's also really fun because, like you said, a lot of runners don't do that sort of stuff, and they actually realize it's quite fun. Like when we use the agility ladders in class and stuff. All right, yeah, there's other ways that we can improve foot and eye coordination and all that sort of stuff. But this is a nice, fun way to do it. That's very, very rare that runners engage in. So
yeah,
again, it just adds that little bit of fun to it.
definitely. As I said, like, especially if your opposite a friend, you're like smiling.
Yeah.
Even if you weren't, to be fair, people were smiling,
Yeah.
and you mixed up who we were against. So it was only two people on at once, which gave you a chance to have a breather if you needed it. But yeah, you were constantly rotating, constantly against different people. But yeah, very fun and a very good activity with lots of benefits. There's so many things you can do with a smile on your face that are going to benefit you. But as you said, a lot of runners don't tend to do these kind of things.
Yeah.
Moving on, I think, did we do the step ups next? Was that after that?
Yeah, so it was the strength stuff next. So the first two exercises, like you said, step ups and the wall squats.
Step ups and wall squats. So yeah, obviously, pretty much everyone will have done a step up at some point, potentially with weight. This was the first time I'd done a step up potentially ever with any weight. So, it's obviously not a complex movement, but it's something different for me to do. So the height, I don't know the exact height of the box.
So it was 20 inches.
20 inch. So centimeters, is that like 60 centimeters? Is it 3 centimeters an inch?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so okay, so 60 centimeter step up. So fairly significant, I guess.
Sorry to interrupt. All I would say on that is that ideally I would have you all a bit lower, but obviously plyo boxes tend to be set heights.
Right.
So that's obviously I've got to work with what I've got in terms of equipment. But yeah, I would say you could go lower in terms of if people are watching and they're looking at doing some of this sort of stuff at home.
Yeah.
They can absolutely go a little bit lower. You kind of basically want your foot on the box and your leg to be at 90 degrees, so your knees in line with your hip kind of thing. Whereas for most of you, your knee will have been slightly higher than your hip when you were standing on those big boxes. But so we've got to work with what we got.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And we flipped the boxes over, didn't we, to get them as low as possible, but still.
Yeah, that's like I said, the lowest. So on their normal position, they're 24 inches instead of 20.
Yeah. But yeah, like as I said, like a strength movement that I've not really done, so something different. A few of us were carrying 10k weights on them as well. Not sure, I couldn't speak for the rest of the class, but I think a lot of people chose 10k weights.
Yeah.
And it was pretty hard, to be fair. Like obviously it's just a step up movement. Everyone will likely know what a step up is, obviously. But at that height, as you say, with that weight, you obviously put a lot of force through one leg. It is one leg, isn't it? When you
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it was pretty hard. Like as you commented on, my legs were like bending in sometimes, or knees were bending in, which isn't, I guess, like ideal. I guess you want a straight kind of line, preferably.
Yeah, you don't want that knee collapsing in. It was like we were talking about before we started recording, the knee valgus element where the knees come in. Obviously, you want to avoid that because then that's overly stressing the knee joint itself. Whereas obviously, we want that knee to be tracking over the foot, so then the quadricep and the glute does all the work.
Yeah, definitely. So, it was a great movement. Like you could just feel the kind of power with each step you were doing, especially as people that are not used to this kind of activity.
Yeah.
You could go into more detail about the kind of importance of this kind of movement, but my thinking would be, as we've discussed, one, like injury prevention, but two, just having more power in your leg, you can perform the same kind of speed for less. What's the word? Less. Less energy or effort, basically.
Absolutely. So yeah, so single leg exercises, I'm sure most runners will know, it's one of the most important elements of your training because, like we just said, when you run, you're essentially doing a single leg jump every time. So it's a single leg sport or exercise. So we obviously want to build strength on the single leg element as well to make sure we've got relative balance between sides, but also that stability on each side as well. So being able to absorb impact, generate force, which is essentially an expression of strength, i.e. contracting the muscles to generate some level of force. And yeah, so step ups and lunges are kind of like we talked about last week with some of the strength exercises, are just some of the best single leg ones that we can do because they emphasize the quadriceps and the glutes. Glutes are good for the hip stability, and the quads are one of the big muscles that absorbs impact when your foot first hits the ground, which helps with that knee stability. So like I said, a lot of times when the knee does collapse in, that's because of a weakness in either the quads or the glute.
100%, yeah. And with an exercise like the lunge or the step up, you can what's the word? You can vary it like with different weights, different heights. A lot of people including myself, would just do like the body weight lunge or a body weight step up, for example. And it has its place, of course, and you can still vary that with different intensities and different kind of speeds and that kind of thing. But adding that weight, which I've never done before, and adding a lot more height as well, can only be a benefit, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, ideally the height would be a little bit lower, but you definitely want something that's probably higher than most people are used to.
Yeah.
We're not talking like an aerobic step or anything like that. We want it higher than that. Like I said, you want that 90-degree bend at the knee when your foot is placed on whatever you're stepping up onto, i.e. the knee is in line with the hip. That's an ideal height that you'd want for your step ups. And then the other thing as well is just making sure that it is a quad focus. So it's easy to cheat the step up because you can use the back leg to push off the floor. So then you're kind of using the back leg calf and things to assist. Whereas obviously I got all you guys to kind of lean forward slightly with the front leg that was on the box to then overemphasize loading up that quad as you went into the step up, which is another reason why it felt harder, because you're actually using the muscles that the exercise is supposed to target rather than half using those and then half using something else that we're not really trying to target on that exercise.
Definitely, yeah. And as I said earlier, like you were going around everyone, looking at everyone as they were doing it, saying what they were doing well, what they were doing wrong. Like, if there was an exercise people were doing right, you'd say, well done, mate, keep it up, that's good. But if there was like, for example, me with the knees collapsing or whatever, or legs collapsing, you'd point that out and I could, take that on board going forward, which was really useful. Instead of, some coach, I guess, might just kind of not stand there, but not offer that much
Yeah.
feedback. So yeah, it was really useful that, and that was mixed in with the squats on the wall. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. So the knee wall squats. So that again is just emphasizing a little bit more what we call glute med. So it's kind of like the muscles on the outside of your butt, which again are really good at controlling hip and knee stability, like we just said there, from collapsing in and things like that. So by pushing the knee into the wall, you're kind of activating those muscles a little bit more.
Yeah.
So isometric holds is a really good way to get muscle activation. So like people who really struggle with glute bridges because they feel it more in their quads or their hamstrings, the best way to try and overcome that is to do static holds rather than doing repetitions, if that makes sense. And then just kind of really trying to help train the brain to activate that right muscle and also feel that activation. So by doing the knee into the wall, we're activating the muscles on the outside of the thigh and the glute, and then engaging in a semi-squat motion, just to again keep that glute engaged as we're then strengthening the quads in a squat pattern as well.
Definitely, yeah. Another exercise I've never done before, so it was a good little challenge. Like, did we use weights for that one? I can't remember.
That one's definitely more of kind of like a prehab exercise in my eyes.
Okay.
So it's good, especially for those who've got IT band syndrome and stuff, but also just as a preventative measure for, like I said, getting a little bit more glute activation. So there's no need to load those ones up. It's more just about feeling the right muscles working and obviously just getting some repetitions and some fatigue in there.
Yeah. But another brilliant exercise. I'm just thinking for people watching, will they understand what we mean by like a knee wall squat?
So in terms of, trying to visualize it, we can always
Yeah.
put a link to video, but all you're going to do is stand side onto a wall. The leg closest to the wall, you're going to bend to 90 degrees. So the knee is the only thing touching the wall. And then your other leg, the furthest away from the wall, is straight. And then all you're doing as well, pushing that knee into the wall, you're sitting back into a little bit of a quarter squat position and then standing back up.
Right, yeah.
It's all about that knee pushing into the wall. So again, it's the only thing that should be in contact on that side that's closest to it. That should be the only thing touching, and you're just really trying to push your knee through the wall whilst engaging in that squat.
And you're parallel with the wall, aren't you?
That's
like looking down.
Perpendicular, so you kind of stood side on like I am now. So I was stood side on facing that way. The wall's running perpendicular to me.
Yeah, perfect. But yeah, another great exercise. And then after that, I think we did calf raises. Was that right?
Yep, just some bog standard calf raises, and then the core exercise with the hollow body holds.
Yeah, so calf raises obviously pretty standard exercise. We did it with a slight
Elevation.
Elevation, yeah. Is that just to make it kind of harder, like a harder exercise?
Just so it increases the range of motion that you're going through. So again, one, it makes it harder. Then as soon as that heel drops below the foot, it obviously makes it more challenging on the calf to develop strength. But also by having a slightly bigger range of motion, you're also getting a bit of an extra stretch through the calf as well.
Yeah.
So it's just good for a little bit of mobility as well in terms of improving the range in the calf. But yeah, other than that, if you haven't got the elevation, you can still absolutely do calf raises just stood on a flat surface. So yeah, this is just kind of another way to increase the challenge. So like we said there, if you haven't got weights at home, a progression for a calf raise would be standing on a flat surface to then standing on the steps. Everyone's got a set stair. Well, most people have a set stairs in their house. Stand on one of those, of front part of your foot on the step, heel hanging off the end, drop the heel below the foot, drive through the toes to lift the heel up. And that'll make it much more challenging.
And even if you don't have stairs, I'm sure there's some kind of hard object. You just need a hard object, right?
Yeah, just something to sit on.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, just something to add that bit of elevation can make a big difference. And as you said, I'll add the link to a few videos from like Facebook and Instagram. You did one for this one as well, so I can put that one on as well.
Yeah, you could always just share the highlights video from.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah,
all the exercises are in there in that video.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so I'll link that in the description if anyone's unsure on any. But obviously, calf raises are pretty standard. You know what they are, but maybe the knee squat or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so calf raise and then the hold.
Yeah.
Hollow hold. Guessing that's kind of like a core exercise. It certainly felt in the core. Really, that was one exercise I felt kind of quite good on. I can't remember how long did we hold that for. Was that?
So it was between 20 and 40 seconds we were going for.
Because we progressed it up, didn't we? We started around 20.
30, and then we kind of, for the last set, I tried to encourage people to go for like 40 seconds or make the variations a little bit harder. But yeah, so remember we touched on last week, of course, stability in terms of being able to stabilize the spine and then add in other movements or just being able to hold that contraction for endurance. And that's essentially what a hollow body is. It's basically a beginner's level core exercise by just doing a static hold. But again, protecting the spine whilst then contracting the core muscles. So we went through different variations. We can always link that as well. But again, it's just a basic core stability exercise. So rather than just doing loads of crunches and sit-ups, it's just better to do some stuff like that if we're looking at improving stability of the core and minimizing lower back pain and all that sort of stuff.
And you offered variations for that as well. So like some people, for example, had the knees tucked up. Yeah. Some people had the arms in front, and I think the hardest version was arms behind with legs straight.
That's right. So basically, the longer the levers or the further the levers go away from your center of gravity, the harder it becomes. So arms by your sides is obviously a lot easier than having your arms overhead because now you've taken it all away. So the challenge of the center of gravity is going further away. So therefore, it's obviously abs are working harder to hold that position.
And as we discussed on last week, a point you made quite clear was like with core, it's all well and good doing like sit-ups and crunches, but you kind of need, I don't know how to explain it, but not external force all the time because that didn't necessarily have external force, but just a bit of kind of little movements. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's not stable.
That's right. So basically, you want to be able to create what we call intra-abdominal pressure. So almost like think about your torso as a canister. So you've got the muscles on the front, so your rectus abdominis, all that sort of stuff. Then you've got your internal external obliques around the side of the canister. Around the back, you've got your erector spinae muscles around the lower back. And then you've got your diaphragm and your pelvic floor to make the top and the bottom of that canister. All that together creates that little cylinder, which you want to be able to fill with air and lock it in. And that then stops the spine from moving excessively. So like I said, you want to, in terms of core stability, you want to be able to engage that, fill that canister, and then ideally progress into doing movements while still keeping that rigid torso. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which you wouldn't get when you're doing things like sit-ups and crunches because all you're doing there is just contracting most of the time the muscles on the front. So whilst we didn't engage in movements there, we could have progressed it onto holding that hollow body position and then doing even just like flutter kicks. So just moving legs up and down, or like I talked about at the end of the session, then adding some weights in or something like that, and maybe even doing some presses whilst engaging that hollow body position.
Yeah, it makes sense because obviously when you're running, you're constantly adjusting, not always, I can't think of the word, like consciously, to different movements. So your body's constantly adapting to little movements which will affect the way your kind of core operates or moves. So you're right, like obviously sit-ups and crunches still have their place. It still can be beneficial, but something that's,
they're good muscular endurance exercises, so improving endurance of your core muscles to fatigue and all that stuff, which, like you said, absolutely has its place. But if we're looking at stability and strength of the core, it's about holding that core in a solid position whilst then engaging other movements. Like in a run, that's when you're moving your arms forward and backwards, and obviously the legs forward and backwards to run. You're then trying to keep the core engaged or protect the spine whilst doing that, and that's core stability, which you won't get from doing sit-ups and crunches. You need to do more specific core stability exercise. So it's basically doing a blend of the two. And just because, like I said, you can get all that stuff easily at home with HIIT workouts and all that stuff, which is why I don't tend to do more of the muscular endurance in terms of I focus more on the core stability elements, just because people don't tend to do that.
Yeah, most people generally do like lots of sit-ups or crunches. That's just what a lot of people know to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you could do both, that'd be brilliant. And then after that, I think, did we go straight to the quad finisher after that?
We did a little bit of glute work as well. Just
Oh yeah.
That session was a lot focused on quads and glutes. So we did some static holds with the glute bridge, and then some sort of marching and leg extensions and stuff like that in the glute bridge position, just to, again, a little bit of fatigue exercise. So that's where we did do a bit of muscular endurance, as it were, and also it's just good for, again, overloading, activating the glutes. And then we moved on to the quad finisher.
Yeah, the quad finisher was absolutely brutal, wasn't it? I don't even know how to explain it, but basically, well, I'll let you explain it actually, because I don't know.
So all we did was what we call some banded knee extensions. So again, I know it'll be hard to picture, but you had a band, a long looped band. Part of it went around the backs of your knees, and then the other part went around your wrists, and then you basically went down to a hands and knees position with a band under tension, and then all you did was straighten your legs. So you pushed your knees backwards, that locked out your legs, lifted your bum up in the air, and that used the quads to execute that knee extension movement. And we just did that until you failed. It's basically, again, muscular endurance, a little bit of a quad burner to finish. And then I kind of made it a bit fun by doing a last person stand-in to see who could keep going for the longest. And the ladies dominated on that one, didn't they?
I was going to say, yeah, the ladies seem to do really well on that. I can't. Why is that? Are they just stronger?
I mean, I think, again, there's some interesting stuff coming out at the moment in terms of ultra athletes, in terms of how well the ladies and the females are doing. I think it's, again, that I think they've just got something in them that just helps them be more mentally robust than males. I don't know. Again, it's hard to say, but when you've got females knocking off and smashing records left, right, and centre of both men and women, and obviously, men and women can absolutely be as strong as each other and fit as each other and all that stuff. But I just think, especially in the ultra world, that mental resiliency is even more of a big factor on those long distance races and runs. So, and the fact that they're demonstrating they can, have a kind of a bit more mental robustness than a male, that might be why, they were dominating the guys over it. They might just have a higher pain threshold. Who knows, mate?
Maybe we're just bad.
Yeah. But they absolutely dominated, and I had to call it, didn't I? Because that was the first time I'd done it for the last person. Well, no, actually, I did it a few weeks before, but that was just a class of men, and they didn't last anywhere near as long as most of you in that class, to be fair. But so I thought, okay, I'll run it again, but it'll be, I'll be done in a few minutes because everyone will kind of hit that failure point. But obviously, I had to cut it because the ladies were just keeping on going. They weren't showing any sign of stopping. So yeah, I think they were going for a good 3 to 5 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, fair play for it. Impressive, to be fair. But yeah, that was the last exercise, and that. Well, me and Brad walked home. Well, tried to jog home after that, and we could certainly feel it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it certainly did its job. But yeah, overall, as I said, brilliant class. Lots of different exercises, and I'm coming back tonight, so obviously can't have been that bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, really good. As I said, you're giving instructions throughout, like what people are doing wrong or right, in a nice way. Some coaches might not. And yeah, very reasonable price as well, and good group of people there. I think a couple of them might have been Eden runners, but that's sad.
Yeah, a couple of Eden runners, like I said. One was Eden Valley Tri as well. Yeah, some good variance in ability as well, which is what I always try and like to, any ability is welcome, whether you've strength trained before, whether you haven't. Like you guys said, you've never really done anything like that before, and I made sure you were happy with what you're doing everything correctly. And then, like I said, there was people who do short distance, long distance, triathlon, all different abilities and disciplines in terms of distance as well. So yeah, it's at the end of the day, everyone will benefit from it. It's open to anyone. So yeah, and then like I said, it's a nice friendly environment.
And it's worth reiterating as well. You know, a 40-minute 5K runner might be better at these exercises than someone doing a 30-minute 5K, for example. It's not just because you're a better runner doesn't mean you can do a better squat or
Not,
not at all. Not
yeah.
at all.
Like I said,
So,
you might have someone like yourself, who's a very fast 5K runner, but you've not really done some of that stuff. And,
yeah.
as we start introducing some more challenge exercise, you might find you don't do as well as, especially again, some of the ladies who are also members of the gym where they've been squatting and stuff on a regular basis. And even in terms of their strength, you might find that some of them are a bit stronger than you.
Oh God, it's going to be
Yeah.
embarrassing.
It's like I said, it's everyone's kind of doing their own thing. You're there to train yourself and challenge yourself rather than worry about everyone else. And that's what I always try and encourage in my classes. Is it's just you versus you at the end of the day. That's what
100%.
your main focus. So,
and that's what I always say with running as well. It's you versus yourself, really. So, and it's great to see people do amazing as well.
yeah,
It goes without saying, it's just a bit of fun, really. So, but also a lot of benefit as well. So yeah, thanks again. Basically, it was a great class,
mate.
No worries. And just before we go into frontal plane loading or training, just going to ask, what percentage of people do you reckon that are runners do strength conditioning every week? If you had to guess, some form of strength conditioning.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say the problem is because that's such a broad term. Like for me personally, I would like to break it into strength and conditioning because I wouldn't consider HIIT work strength. I would, like you said, consider that conditioning, which is absolutely beneficial. But in terms of if we said strength work, I'd be very surprised if it was over 60%.
So if you're saying it's just strength work, like your kind of class.
Yeah, so you got to remember strength, the definition of strength is producing force or producing as much force as possible in it. And then if you look at power, doing that as quickly as possible, which a runner would need to obviously produce force, minimize time on the ground in terms of foot contact. That's classed as power. So, and that kind of training is focused on lower reps, higher weights, all that sort of stuff, more neuromuscular adaptations rather than muscular adaptations, which you tend to get from HIIT and high reps and all that sort of stuff. So I know lots of people probably do high rep circuits and all that sort of thing, even if it is using weights. But in terms of the weight they're using, I would say that if they're not progressing that on a regular basis, then they're not getting stronger. So in terms of those that engage in actual structured strength training or stuff like my classes, I would be very surprised if it was more than 60% of the
It's interesting you say 60%. If I had to guess, like say you take 500 park runners, how many people do strength work? I'd almost be shocked if it's more than like 20%, especially with gyms closed and like a lot of people don't have equipment at home.
Yeah, obviously during this time, definitely.
Yeah, but even so, like, so you would think more than half of people do strength work every week.
I might be being naive. I might be trying to be a bit too positive there, but yeah. I mean, to be fair, I don't know where I get that number from, considering the amount of runners that I work with, coaching wise, that have never done strength training before.
Yeah, and I guess you're going to be working with people that do it generally, so maybe that's kind of influence you thought. Not everyone, but
yeah, because obviously when I coach at the gym that I work at, I do see, like I said, there are people who like to run and engage in running stuff, and they obviously all lift weights at the gym as well. But in terms of what I coach online, actual specific runners themselves, to be fair, there's a lot of them that haven't done strength training or don't engage in, structured strength training. So that's where, again, I've come in to help them is put in a run program for them as well as a structured strength program alongside it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to do a poll on that, but be specific on what actually is strength, because as you said, a lot of people would probably include like a HIIT class, for example.
Yeah, I would say personally for me, I define strength as lower reps, higher weights.
Yeah.
Simplify it as much as that. So I would say repetitions between 4 to 6 on movement, and then using a weight that's appropriate to make that 4 to 6 reps feel challenging.
Right. Okay.
Like when we did our step ups, we did 6 per leg. So I did 6 per leg to promote people to give the confidence to use more weight rather than going 15 per leg, where then you might think, well, actually, I'll just do body weight, which, like you said, you can do that at home. You can do that as a part of a HIIT class or whatever. I wanted to try and focus on getting you stronger, therefore lower reps, higher weight. So again, let's say you use tens that session. in a few weeks' time, they're going to come back up in another class, then you'll go, right, well, now I'll try and use 12s for the same reps. I've now overloaded my muscles further and gotten stronger.
Because it's a good point. My instinct when we did the step ups, when you said you can get a weight or not, was not to get one because obviously I'd never used a weight. So like,
yeah,
but
and
obviously I saw.
Yeah, and that's it though. The key thing is you'd never done it, but I encouraged it because if you then did it and your technique was awful, then I would absolutely go, right, the weight's too heavy for you. Either drop to a lower weight or to no weight at all and make sure you get the technique right. But like I said, you demonstrated good movement. Yeah, there was a little bit of knee movement, but we can easily fix that over time. But it wasn't anything too dangerous. So yeah, absolutely. If I'd seen you do step ups body weight, I would have then gone to and gone, well, why are you doing them body weight? I would go, right, well, go and grab some five, especially on a simple movement like a step up. There's no real reason not to load it up. We had dumbbells all the way from 5 kilos up to 40 kilos. So there's a weight there that's pretty much appropriate for any ability.
Yeah, I'll be on 50 next week, mate. You just watch. But yeah, interesting, and yeah, we'll try and get a poll up specific to strength. But moving on to frontal plane training. So obviously you know loads about this, but from what I've researched, I've got a little something up here. It's basically an area that we ignore. I can't remember the other area that we don't ignore. What was that again?
So there's 3 planes. The one that we kind of overemphasize or utilize the most is the sagittal plane.
Sagittal plane, right?
Yeah. So running itself is a sagittal plane exercise. So if you imagine breaking the body into segments, the sagittal plane essentially puts like a bit of let's say a pane of glass goes through the middle of my body and breaks it up between left and right. So the glass is sticking out this way. So I have my left part of my body, one side of the glass, and my right part of the body, the right side of the glass. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Then basically any movements that I do that are parallel to that piece of glass are sagittal plane exercises. So if the glass is going through my body this way, if I do that, that's going, as in lifting my arm up and down, that's obviously parallel to that pane of glass. So that's a sagittal plane exercise. And obviously when we run, we move our legs forward and backwards and our arms forward and backwards. So they are sagittal plane movements.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. But so basically, the frontal plane is an area that's still critical as a runner, both in terms of injury prevention, but also the ability to change direction, which we've previously discussed as being important as well. But yeah, so I saw a few examples of exercises online, and they are like all lateral, like moving almost, I would say, crab movement, side to side, whether it's with a resistance band or pulling something along. But yeah, as we said, an area that is not as emphasized on or done by many athletes. Obviously, I'm one of them. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah. So if you think we just talked about strength, now even though running is a sagittal plane exercise, we still have to resist forces in the other 2 planes of motion. One of them being the frontal plane. So like I talked about there, sagittal plane breaks the body into left and right.
Yeah.
The frontal plane, or the coronal plane is also known, breaks the body into front and back. So that pane of glass is now dissecting through my body with the front part of it obviously in front, the back part of it behind it. So then any movements I do parallel to that pane are then classed as frontal plane exercises. So if I move my arm out to the side or move my leg out to the side or back in towards the middle of the body, those are classed as frontal plane exercises. And when we run, if you think every time we step, one foot hits the ground, the other foot's off the floor, we then have the pelvis wanting to do this.
Yeah.
Which is frontal plane movement, as it were, because obviously it's moving parallel to that pane of glass. Or the other plane of motion is what we call the transverse plane, which is basically breaking your body between top and bottom. So anything you do, so basically that's like rotation and all that sort of stuff is the other plane of motion. So we want to be able to resist those forces upon the pelvis, the knee. So again, remember the knee collapsing in and out, that again potentially classes a frontal plane movement. So we're trying to resist those happening. So therefore we need to be strong in that plane of motion to resist those forces upon the body as we engage in that front sagittal plane running motion. That makes sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So whilst it's not a frontal plane exercise, we need to be strong in that plane basically to minimize excess movement at the pelvis, at the knee, things like that. All right, and that's like you said, where it comes to doing lateral movements on the whole. So again, just help minimize things like hip drop, so the pelvis dropping excessively from one side to the other as the foot comes off the floor, the knee collapsing inwards, which then can cause overloading of those joints and potential injuries. So you can do all the lunges and the step ups and all that stuff. Because remember, that's a sagittal plane exercise as well. But if we're not doing any frontal plane, we're never going to get those key stabilizing muscles strong enough to stop those motions from happening. Like I said, the knee coming in, pelvis dropping, and all that stuff every time we go for a run.
Yeah, and something like a hip drop or a knee collapse, I guess that just generally decreases like the efficiency of your run. Like it's always hard to describe, but if you've got two legs and they're just kind of moving straight and consistently without any kind of, you can just imagine it like little drops. It's just you're not going to be as smooth and efficient
Absolutely.
if you've got these kind of deficiencies. So adding these kind of exercises, frontal plane exercises, I guess can be so useful to decreasing this kind of problem.
Yeah.
What would you say are like a couple of really good exercises?
So, like you said there, you can improve run economy as well as that injury prevention. Because, like, again, like if your knees caving inwards, you're then not really executing as an efficient running gait. So just being able to stabilize that knee centrally over the ankle, the foot, and all that stuff again, just means you're not leaking energy. In terms of exercises, we can start off super basic with things like we talked about the side lying leg raises. So lying on your side, lifting your leg up and down. So that's using your abductor muscles, so the muscles on the outside of the thigh and the outside of the glute, which again tend to be quite weak in people. Then you can progress to things like the band walks, so the crab style side walk with a mini band around the legs, which we did in our warm up last week in the class. To then go into things like your lateral lunges. So again, side lunges instead of forward lunges. You can go into side step ups. So again, standing side onto a box, stepping sideways up onto it and down. So again, all that's working that abduction. We can do single leg balance with then a lateral movement of a leg. So you've got one foot on the floor, you then move the other leg sideways. So again, you're challenging single leg balance as well as strengthening those abductor muscles and obviously resisting forces in that frontal plane. Because obviously if you're on one leg, shifting one leg out to the side, you're trying to minimize that knee caving in, the foot and ankle collapsing and all that sort of stuff, which again strengthens you for that frontal plane and resisting those forces. So there's loads of exercise that you can do that are around it. But if you're going to choose one, if let's say you go, right, I want to do some frontal plane training, I would go for the lateral lunge straight away.
Okay, right, yeah. Just from personal experience, obviously I haven't really done any, but I have done the side abductor one, and that's been brilliant for me. But side lunge as well.
So yeah, so the leg raise is absolutely spot on. That's a good beginning point to start with in terms of building that abductor and glute strength. So, like I said, a lot of knee collapse tends to be lack of strength in the glute med, which is the kind of the muscles on the outside of your butt. And like I said, the best way to strengthen those is through doing some form of abduction, which is, they said, moving the leg away from the body. And like I said, the leg raises and all that stuff and the band walks are a good starting point. But again, if we talk about strength, i.e. overloading it, making it harder, we can then obviously go to the side lunge or lateral lunge and then start incorporating dumbbells into the mix as well, making it heavier.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, there's loads of exercises. I'll probably attach a link to a few. There was a few good websites if you think they're good as well, obviously. Yeah. Just if people are interested in that. But yeah, so the frontal plane, remind me of the other two planes just again.
So the sagittal, so that's sagittal. The forward and backwards.
So would like a squat movement be classed as sagittal or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, sagittal. Yeah. And then what was the last one?
Transverse.
Transverse.
So rotation, basically.
Rotation. So what would be an example of a rotation?
So, like a Russian twist.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
Or if you're doing like a med ball throw against a wall or something like that, that would be classed as a transverse exercise.
Right. Okay. So
anything that involves you rotating your torso like this would be classed as a kind of transverse exercise.
Right. Okay. And basically, the message is, if you can cover all three of these planes, you're kind of covering all bases. It's like a comprehensive program for you. Like every little kind of nook and cranny in your body is being addressed by these different. What was that? Sorry.
My phone's ringing. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
be in the background. But yeah, absolutely. The goal is to be strong in all three planes of motion, and that will give you the best chances of minimizing any undue stress or force on your joints, because you're then able to deal with all those forces in those different directions without, like I said, compensating somewhere else on the body.
Yeah, I'm just interested to know, would you say that you're, for someone that's never been injured and, an ultra runner, would you say you've got any like particular weaknesses now, or would you say you've really kind of focused on everything you needed to address?
I would say the thing is, remember, it's just it's not a once you've got it and it's fixed, it's then sorted forever. You've got to
Yeah,
remember that it's a constant process. So I'm kind of now at that point where I'm in maintenance mode. I haven't got any particular weaknesses, but if I do neglect something for a little bit, I will feel it. So a good example, to be fair, is during lockdown, I did get a bit lackluster with some of my upper body mobility, and I started to get a little bit of discomfort in the middle of my upper back,
okay.
like in between my shoulder blades. And then all it was just going, well, obviously I've understood now what's happened is I've lost a little bit of range of motion on my right side compared to my left than what I used to have, just because I've neglected that mobility and started to compensate slightly. So I just quickly did a visual assessment on myself and realized that, and was like, okay, well, obviously I know what I need to do to fix that. Start working again just on mobilizing that right side of things. So I still get those bits, but the problem is, or not the problem, sorry, the difference is that when something happens, I identify it straight away, because remember, if you're feeling discomfort, pain, or something like that, that's your body's signs of saying something's wrong. And if
Yeah,
you ignore it and ignore it, it'll get worse and worse and worse. So for
yeah,
me, I could feel that discomfort coming in, so I knew, right, I need to address it. So therefore, I got back into a routine of doing certain exercise. Even though I'm mobile, not been injured and stuff, I can still potentially get those niggles if I don't keep on top of the exercises that help prevent that happening in the first place.
definitely, yeah. But I guess some people that maybe don't do any upper body mobility or any upper body strength at all, and they might not have any discomfort whatsoever. How could you explain that? Like, is it just
In
like look?
terms of why they don't have that discomfort,
Well, yeah, is it just kind of sometimes this luck of the draw, like because
yeah,
obviously,
it can, and also the thing is, it could be a fact that they've never had that range in the first place, so therefore they're not kind of feeling that slipping away. There's no atrophy happening or restrictions happening in the muscles. It could be that, again, pain science is still really, really in its infancy. The way their brain perceives pain and discomfort could be completely different to mine. There's people out there that have got herniated discs and prolapse discs in their spine and don't feel any pain whatsoever. And then
yeah,
there's people that have maybe a little spasm in their lower back muscles and feel like their spine's broken in half. Everyone's way that the brain interprets pain is very different. So it's hard to say really, but yeah, for me personally, I knew when something was going wrong, so therefore I said I could fix it straight away, and it's a continual process. I always do my prehab work on a regular basis. Obviously, I engage in regular strength work, but yeah, I'd say generally I'm not too bad in terms of that balance between left and right, and I certainly include multiple planes of motion in terms of my training.
I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Like if there is a problem, if you are in pain somewhere, then it's not really worth kind of ignoring it. Like even if it does go away, like the chance that it could come back, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I would also then question that. So I'd say, well, if it's gone away, why? How has it gone away? And 9 times out of 10, it's because the person who's in pain has said, well, because I stopped.
Yeah,
I rested for 2 weeks and the pain was gone. And then I went and did the activity again and the pain was there.
yeah,
So they think that because they're out of pain, that the problem's been fixed just
yeah,
because they rested. Rest is purely just to stop the pain from happening. You then need to address why the pain started in the first place. And
mm,
that's where a lot of people fall down. They either ignore it till it gets to the point where it's an injury, or, like I said, they just rest, the pain goes away for a bit, then they start the same activity without changing anything and wonder why it's come back. Yeah, rest is just part of the process of recovery. It's not the reason to get rid of the pain in the first place. That makes sense.
yeah. 100%, 100%.
So that's, again, like I said, you should never run through pain ever. If you do, like I said, you're just setting yourself up for an injury in the long term. You need
Well,
to address why
when
it's
you
happened in the first place.
but when you say pain, you mean like injury? Because obviously you're going to be like in a 5K, you're going to be in pain.
Oh yeah, yeah. So what I mean is in like a shooting pain in your knee every
Yeah,
time you take a step, or a shooting pain down your back every time you bend over, stuff like that. If you're running and your knee is absolutely killing as soon as you start running, there's obviously something wrong. Yeah, in terms of being in pain, I would say that while you're running, that's probably more discomfort. You
yeah,
feel achiness, you feel tired, you feel fatigue, muscles tightening and stuff like that in a race. That's obviously completely different. That's discomfort in my eyes. Pain, like I said, is an indicator to the brain or from the brain that something is wrong with your body, and you need to address why that's happening. And rest is part of that process. But once you've rested, it should be then a case, well, now I'm out of pain. I now need to figure out what happened and start to address that. If you just go back to normal training, of course the pain's going to come back.
Rowan Wood, a physio in Lancaster, he always speaks about how, if you do get an injury or a pain, often like the worst thing you can do is just do nothing and rest. Like often it is a case of loading up that injury or, just modifying the exercise, keep you moving basically. Which for someone like me, it came as kind of like a shock a few years ago. I was like, surely you just rest and don't do anything, but it's the opposite of that.
As well, like you said, if the pains or the injuries potentially come from a lack of strength or a lack of range of motion somewhere, the longer you rest, the more likely you're going to lose more strength and lose more range of motion. Yes, you've got an injury, but you still can do plenty of exercises that work around that. Whether it's if you've got injured one leg, you can still work on strength on the other leg, or if it's a lower body injury, you can work on upper body strength and mobility. There's lots of means and ways around it to make sure, like I said, that you're not risking the injured area, but you're still keeping yourself moving, mobile, supple, all that sort of stuff. Absolutely.
Definitely, yeah. And just to finish with, obviously on all these episodes, we cover different like areas of strength or fitness you can work on. And I guess for someone that's like working every day, realistically, this is just from my perspective, you can't do like everything. Like you probably could, but like you're not gonna have time for like a social life, for example, if you do absolutely everything. If it's not like your full-time job. So what would you say on that? Like
in terms of strength, how you can get it all in.
Yeah.
If you think though, let's do 2 strength sessions per week. Yeah. 45 minutes per session. You could probably easily get 4 to 5 exercises in that time. So let's say 4. So you can get 8 exercises per week. All right. So you think straight away that's 8 things you can do. All right. You can easily cover multi-planar movements in there by doing some form of lateral lunge. There's one exercise. And then let's say some sort of anti-rotation core exercise like a power-off press. So there's your transverse plane. There's your frontal plane covered. Do a single leg strength exercise like a step up, a lunge, or even just some squats. So therefore, you've got 4 exercises out of there. Chuck in another couple of core exercises, all right? And then maybe a hamstring and glute exercise like a single leg deadlift or a Romanian deadlift or something like that, all right? And then straight away, that's only 7. So I've done an exercise in the week that's pretty much covered all of my key areas in my lower body: glutes, hamstrings, hips, calves, foot and ankle, all right? And then we've hit multi-planar movements as well. You've got, a session there, like I said, and it's an hour and a half a week.
Definitely, yeah. And I guess your class is a great example of it. Like we did a lot really in that. Is it an hour? I forget how long.
An hour. It was an hour, and that's including a warm-up, So we did a warm-up, we did some single leg balance, we did some agility, and we did 4 strength exercises and a little bit of a finisher at the end for muscular endurance, and that took us 55 minutes.
There you go, yeah. So yeah, it's
just about planning. That's the key. You need to plan. And therefore, if you think about it logically, you can put a couple of strength sessions together that absolutely do all you need to do as a runner to develop strength, injury prevention, improve run economy, all that jazz. And then even what you can do is just then rotate. So like every 8, 12 weeks, just change some of the exercises up to keep it interesting, Or even if you want to do it more regularly than that, that's absolutely fine. Like we do in the strength for runners classes, you don't do the same 4 movements every week in terms of the strength.
You progress them as well.
We progress them, we rotate them, as long as they do a similar job. So you think about, all right, I want to work my quad strength. You've got squats, you've got lunges, you've got step-ups, you've got even more basic exercises like that quad burner we did with the banded knee extensions. You've got wall squats. Do you know what I mean? So there's lots of different variations you can use that all do a relatively similar job. So that means you've got lots of variety in there that you can go, right, well, for a first couple of weeks, I'm going to do a forward lunge. Next couple of weeks, I'm going to do a step up. Next couple of weeks, I'm going to do this, that. So there's lots of variations of exercises to be able to then keep it a little bit interesting, but still hitting the key areas and the key planes of motion.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. I think we'll wrap up there.
Cool.
Good episode again. Really enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
And yeah, lots of interesting topics. As I said, I'll leave links in the description regarding both Lee's class and frontal plane loading. If anyone's got any questions, as always, feel free to ask either Lee or myself.
Yeah.
Anything else to add, Lee?
No, all good, mate. Like I said, just reach out to us if people need help. It'd be great for people to share the videos as usual, and yeah, that's about it really. If you're in the lakes, come to my class.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, one tonight, which should be good. Should be
Cool.
good. All right, but thanks again for watching, guys, and we will see you next time.
Oh, isn't it?
Yeah.